we're really excited to have Laura with us today, who is the intensive case management coordinator at Sage Senior Safe House, where she works with seniors on the wait list to get into the safe house and do follow-up work with the Seniors Protection Partnership. Laura has been working in elder abuse in a variety of roles for almost 3 years, and she's here today to talk about healthy and unhealthy relationships and how to recognize and take action against abuse in your own relationships and in others around you. We're so happy to have you here, Laura. I will give you the floor.
Well, thanks so much, Amber. Yeah, so it's nice to be able to meet with some people. So I'll just share my screen here right away. Okay. And are you guys able to see this presentation?
Perfect. I can see it. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Yeah, so to start off with, I'm going to talk about how we would define elder abuse. So it's any action or inaction by a person in a trusting relationship that causes harm and distress to an older adult. And this can be single acts or repeated acts. The main kind of thing that we look at to differentiate between elder abuse and assault would be this relationship of power and control, and in a relationship where there's trust and dependency. So often with older adults, there's the need to rely on family or friends to be able to, figure out things like getting rides places or just help around the house. And unfortunately, this can put some people in a vulnerable position. And so when someone takes advantage of those vulnerabilities, that's where we would call it elder abuse. And so here we have a list of potential abusers. So there's adult children, grandchildren, spouse or common law partner, children-in-law, unrelated caregivers as well, other family members, friends, roommates, neighbors, even landlords. So one thing that all these people have in common is that these are all people who would be close to a senior, and that you would think there would be a trusting relationship, right? I mean, we want to be able to trust our children and grandchildren and be able to ask them for help. And unfortunately, some people take advantage of that. So these are some types of elder abuse. And I'm just remembering too, I wanted to mention, if anyone has any questions at any time, feel free to interrupt and let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions, and there'll also be some time at the end too for me to answer any questions. So the types of elder abuse that for the people that I work with are emotional or psychological abuse, which could be name calling, verbally putting someone down, ignoring them, giving someone the silent treatment, telling the person that they're crazy. So especially with seniors, there's often this idea of like, oh, well, it's your meds, it's the meds that you're on, or you're getting older, you're losing your memory, you don't remember that right. And this is actually gaslighting. It's a type of abuse, and it's to make the person think that they're crazy and make it that they're less likely to report a problem or try and get help because they think that it's them, that they deserve what's happening to them, right? And then there's also financial abuse. So this can be, of course, taking money, or even objects, selling them, changing legal documents. So, a child might decide that, well, they want to be able to own their parents' home. So getting their parents to sign over the house to them, or even changing will or power of attorney, things like this, so that they have financial control over the senior or the senior's money, either while they're still alive or even after death, that, is often against their wishes. And then physical abuse is, I think we all often think of that. So, hitting, pushing, punching. Unfortunately, this does still happen with seniors. So it's something to be able to look out for and identify that, yeah, it may not be just falling. That's why someone has a bruise. And then neglect. So passive neglect would be noticing that something is wrong and choosing to do nothing about it. So, seeing that a senior is in distress or struggling with something and not doing anything to try and help fix it, especially if that person is, supposed to be helping take care of the senior. And active neglect would be purposely depriving a senior of their needs. So, it could be not allowing them to have food when they want, keeping them confined in a room, things like that. And medication abuse. So that can involve stealing medication to use for oneself, or selling the medication, or even giving the senior too much of a medication, more than they need, in order to perhaps get them to behave a certain way. And then also sexual abuse, which is unfortunately something that does still happen for seniors. Yeah, it's a real terrible thing. And what we found too is that it's really tied to that power and control. Sexual assault is about trying to gain power over someone. Yeah. So now I'm going to go over some more like in-depth kind of signs of these different types of abuse, so that you can learn how to recognize it in people around you and perhaps in yourself. So signs of emotional abuse in someone would be some depression and anxiety, perhaps. I mean, those can be from other causes as well. But, it's very easy to fall into some depression and anxiety when people around you are not treating you right. A person experiencing emotional abuse can also become very passive and compliant, very willing to give away information or just whatever you say, that's what I'll do. They may be more socially withdrawn. And they may be more fearful around certain people. Maybe they don't want you to, don't tell my son that, don't tell my daughter that. So I don't want them to know, especially with doctors. I think that's when those things can become evident. Like, please don't talk to this person. That's a big sign. And then they also, because they're being put down so much with emotional abuse, they'll often be very self-deprecating. Sometimes might call themselves names, or just like put themselves down and be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm so stupid. They might be over apologetic, things like that. And because it's what they're hearing all the time at home, unfortunately, that they're doing things wrong. The abuser will often make the person in need feel as if they're the cause of the abuse, that they're the ones responsible, which isn't true. And signs of financial abuse would be being unable to meet financial obligations. So someone who's experiencing financial abuse might start to ask other friends and family to borrow money. This can be a sign. It might be unusual withdrawals from their bank accounts. They may express that they've signed documents that they're not sure what they signed, or that they felt forced to do this. And I mean, it's often about providing money for someone they care about and love a lot. So it can be quite tough, especially, if it's your child or grandchild and you see that they're struggling. It's real tough to not be able, to hold back from providing, especially in that parent kind of role. But yeah, sometimes it can be for substance use. And another thing would be a change in living environment. So often, seniors being on a fixed income, they, if they're experiencing financial abuse, they may find that, oh, I can't live on my own, on my fixed income, and also be able to support this person. And so they might bring that person to live with them or move in with roommates. Usually the person who's financially abusing them will end up moving in with them because then you also get a place to stay. So yeah, that can be something to look out for as well for people in your life of, oh, I noticed that you're moving in with your son or daughter, like everything okay with them? Get more information about it, right? Signs of physical abuse would be unexplained physical injuries, so broken bones, bruises, pressure marks, abrasions, burns even. Another sign can be frequent falls. So they may have injured themselves and then that's resulting in more falls. They may be suffering from a concussion that's been undiagnosed. Or they could be even saying that they're having frequent falls, but what it is that it's physical abuse and that's how they're masking it. And also pain. And I mean, if any of you are seniors, you'll look at these and these are things that, pain is a pretty common thing as we get older. So sometimes it can be hard to tell if, oh, is this just a part of your body now, of medication you're on, anything like that? Or is this part of, is this a sign of physical abuse? So it's always a good thing to just ask if you're feeling unsure and you're worried about someone. Some signs of neglect would be seeing that things are lacking in a person's living environment. So you might notice that maybe they haven't changed their clothes in quite a while, or their clothes aren't fitting right, that they don't have enough food, or perhaps they're asking you for food or money for food. Perhaps they don't have other things like their medications that they need, eyeglasses, hearing aids. Can also be changes. You might also notice changes in hygiene or nutrition, some weight loss, signs of malnutrition. And there's also often a delay in seeking medical treatment. And some of this could be that, they're also perhaps experiencing emotional abuse and are afraid to ask for support of their abusive person, to be able to go seek medical attention. Or it could be that, they just aren't able to go themselves and they don't know who to ask for help. Now, I thought it was also important to talk about elder abuse for men. So men experience abuse too. And often what we find is that for men, there's a lot more barriers to disclosing if they're experiencing abuse. And this can be for a variety of reasons. One of them is that there's unfortunately not a whole lot of support for men that are experiencing domestic violence or elder abuse. In Alberta, there is a total of 3 elder abuse shelters. Thankfully, all 3 take men in, but they're in Edmonton, Calgary, and Red Deer. There is one other shelter in Alberta, to my knowledge, that has 1 spot for a man if they're experiencing violence. But otherwise, it's, the man has to figure it out for himself, or they'll stay in a homeless shelter, which, especially for a senior, is not ideal. And it's important to realize and remember that all these types of abuse that I've just talked about can and do happen to men, and we need to look for these same signs in older men. Men often have a harder time talking about some of these vulnerable things and admitting that you're being taken advantage of, and experiencing abuse is incredibly hard to do and takes an incredible amount of courage. And so asking is truly the best thing you can do to help someone out. Sometimes what we found as well with men is that they've been experiencing abuse, perhaps from a partner or a adult child, for most of their lives, but they're only able to get help now as a senior. So I'd like to also talk about some barriers to disclosure that some people have. Because often a question that's kind of asked from people that aren't experiencing abuse themselves is, well, how come they didn't ask for help? Or why don't they just leave that person? Like, how come they're putting up with this? So these are some things that we found from like the clients that I've worked with. So, if it's a person that you love, it is so hard to report that abuse, especially if it's your child or grandchild. A lot of times, especially child or grandchild abuse, the senior doesn't want to press charges, doesn't want any police involvement, because they don't want their child to end up in jail with a criminal record. They don't want to make things worse for them. There's also sometimes a feeling of hopelessness, especially if a person has experienced type of, various forms of abuse throughout their lives. It's, it can become just the pattern. This is just how they live. And they can feel very hopeless of like, well, what else is there for me out there? There might also be language or cultural factors. Some other cultures, grandparents are often living with their children and grandchildren for their whole lives. And so, that makes it very difficult to leave, or it can even just be seen in a very negative light to leave your partner, to separate from your children, let's say. So, yeah, those things play a factor. Fear is also a big factor. Leaving an abusive situation can be very dangerous, actually. So if you yourself are thinking about leaving a abusive relationship, I would encourage you to think about it and make sure that there's a safety plan in place. Studies have shown that a person is in more danger when they leave an abusive situation, and if they go back, than when they're in the abusive situation, because leaving the abuse takes back power from the abusive person, and power is what they're wanting from this situation. And so taking back that power can make a person more dangerous. So fear is a very real thing, and it's something that we definitely consider when I'm working with people and they're considering leaving abuse. We talk through those things and try and figure out how safe they are leaving. Medical disabilities are a huge thing as well. It can be very daunting and scary to think of, if you've got things set up in your house right now, things are working, of like, there's a shower that works for me that I can access. It's all one level, it can be very scary to think of like, how am I going to do this? I'm on oxygen. How am I going to be able to get my oxygen? Things like this. And maybe the person physically isn't able to get out of the house to be able to get help, especially right now with COVID. There's been a lot of cases that people aren't able to get the help they need because the abusive person is there 24/7. Also mental impairments. So yeah, they may not be able to communicate effectively that they're in distress. Isolation, as I kind of mentioned, if the person is totally isolated by the abused person, to get help can be very difficult, especially help that works for the person, because if you are going to leave, you kind of need some things set up of where am I going to go to, how am I going to get my needs met, and yeah, you need to be able to talk to supportive people to figure that out. Also inappropriate medication, so that can be part of this medication abuse. If they're if their medications are being mismanaged and so they're having trouble staying awake during the day and staying awake at night, that can be a barrier. As I kind of mentioned earlier, this can just be a normal thing. Perhaps they've were abused by their parents as a kid and then abused by their partner later on, and then now being abused by their kids. It can be just accepted as this is normal. This is what my life is. And also they may be unaware of the resources that are available. Working at the Safe House, which is a shelter for people leaving abusive situations, I hear it all the time that people didn't know that there was such a thing in Edmonton and that they could get this level of support. And I mean, if a person is dependent on this person that is abusing them, it can be so difficult to leave. That person might be taking them to all their appointments, might be helping them out with any of their daily living tasks. And so to leave that person, it can be, yeah, very daunting. So these are some contributing factors to elder abuse. And this isn't like, if you've got these things, then you're likely to experience elder abuse. Not at all. These instead are things that we've noticed that can essentially lead to more vulnerability, so that it is unfortunately easier to take advantage of a person. So depression is one. Person has past experience with abuse. There's often some trauma still lingering, and abusive people seem to be able to really pick up on that. There's also, a level of dependency on others can create that vulnerability. Also, having a lack of information. So if they're isolated and they're not aware of SAGE or the Safe House, or that police are willing to help with things, that could be a factor. Learned family response. So perhaps in some families it's quite regular to yell at each other. That can be a factor as well. Ageism, especially internalized ageism. Every once in a while I hear it from a senior I'm working with that they're, because of their age, that maybe they deserve this, or, why get help now, which is absolutely terrible. No one should be living in an abusive situation in any age. But I think especially as a senior, when a person is more vulnerable, that's, it's really important to make sure that everyone's rights are being honored and respected. But yeah, unfortunately, ageism is a factor, and in other agencies as well. So even doctors not noticing these signs and not taking them seriously, and the people around them thinking that these are a factor of their age, that can be a problem. Uh, Also cultural attitudes. So sometimes, oh, I missed one, but I'll go back. So sometimes it's just part of the culture to think like, no, this person's older, they don't need to, I'm going to manage everything for them, things like this. And maybe then there's things that they're needing and wanting that they're not able to express and get for themselves. Addiction issues can also be a factor. So this can be addiction in their adult child or grandchild or other family member that's come in, or addiction issues themselves. It can unfortunately be easy to take advantage of people with addiction issues. Caregiver distress is also a big thing. Yeah, they like sometimes that can be a family member that's taking care of a senior and they're not getting the help and support that they need. And so they might get to the point that they are yelling at the senior in frustration or, abusing their medication. And it's because they're burnt out and they don't know what else to do. Can also be an abuser's sense of entitlement, so thinking that because they're the child or grandchild, niece, nephew, that they should have a right to the senior's money, to the senior's house, things like that. And unresolved family conflict. There's some cases I've seen where the spouse of the senior was abusive towards the children and towards the senior when they were younger. And now the children are resenting their parents for not leaving and for letting that happen. And so those things can be some factors. So in terms of prevention, there are certain things that you can do in your own life to protect yourself. So you can plan ahead and explore options for power of attorney, personal directive. I would strongly encourage anyone at any age to make sure that you have a power of attorney in place and a personal directive. So power of attorney is a person that is managing your money when you lose capacity or when you decide to give them that ability. And personal directives makes the choices for you of like how you're going to live. Really consider who you put down as the agent for those. Make sure that it's someone that you really trust with your money and that you feel will honor and respect your how you want to live, your beliefs and values. And always, if you take anything away, please be so careful and cautious about who you decide to open a joint bank account with. Because once you open a joint bank account with someone, or even just lend someone your debit card, your credit card, something like that, if that person decides to take all your money, you cannot press charges. Police will not get involved with that. Unfortunately, legally, they will just say you decided to trust this person with your money, with access to your account. And so this is the consequence. So please be so careful before opening a joint bank account with anyone. Also, take time to thoughtfully explore major decisions, such as moving in with family. If you or a friend of yours is thinking about moving in with family, maybe you want to help out with your grandchildren, maybe your child needs a little bit of help, you want to save some money, things like that. Just, be able to have those conversations with the people you're moving in with of how are you going to resolve conflict and disagreements, and what is each person contributing to the house, so that everything is very clear. So you have an understanding of what that person is going to be able to contribute to you and what you're contributing to them. Also ensure that financial matters are protected. Seek legal advice on your legal documents. And remember that older adults' needs and wishes are of equal value to the needs and wishes of others. you don't need to put your children and grandchildren ahead of yourself. You need to make sure that your rights are respected as well. So sometimes the warning signs of abuse are often mistaken as part of growing older, and they might look like other health conditions. So, things like mental confusion, depression, or anxiety that can be a result of abuse may also look like dementia or, frequent falls and long-term pain is very easily dismissed as, being just a part of aging, but it can be the result of abuse or neglect. So, like, the best thing you can do for a person is to just ask, like, hey, I've noticed like you seem to be, behaving a little bit differently. You seem to be, a little bit more worried about this or that. Like, is everything okay at home? Things like this. Doesn't hurt to ask. Worst case, they say, oh no, I'm fine. At least they know that you're caring for them. So in terms of responding to elder abuse, it's really important to take some kind of action, look into things. Everyone has a role to play in preventing elder abuse. And there's so many people in the community that can help. There's police, social workers at various agencies, home care, healthcare professionals, dentists, anyone that's kind of coming in touch with a senior has the ability to be able to reach out and start some movement. So things to keep in mind if you're suspecting that someone is experiencing abuse and you're wanting to ask about it would be to remember that abuse is never the fault of the person who's being abused. Doesn't matter what they might say, doesn't matter what the abusive person has told them. There's no excuse, no reason to steal people's money, to beat someone up. Like there's no excuse. So keep that in mind. It's never the person's fault. And if an older adult does disclose to you that they're being abused, make sure that you express to them that you believe them. Even if they don't want to do anything about it, if they, would rather just stay quiet about it, that's okay. Just having someone that believes them is just like one step further to being able to get to a safer place. It takes people a long time to be able to leave abusive relationships. And so every little step in the right direction is huge. And if you suspect abuse, check it. Just ask some questions. Don't be afraid to check on that. And even if it's just, if they do express that they're being abused and you're like, wow, I don't know what to say, just say that. That's at least, they have someone that will give the person essentially permission to talk to you in the future. They know that you're a safe person to talk to. So these are some important phone numbers. So we're getting to the end here. So I want to make sure that there's time for you guys to ask questions if you have any. So I'll just briefly talk about each of these. So the Seniors Protection Partnership is a partnership between City of Edmonton, Edmonton Police Services, Community Geriatric Psychiatry, Catholic Social Services, and SAGE. So I'm on that team representing SAGE. So because they have nurses and police officers and social workers involved, they're able to act on third-party reports and go and investigate and see if abuse is taking place. So even if you aren't able to action, you're feeling unsure, you can still report potential abuse to the Seniors Protection Partnership and they can look into it for you and check that things are okay. There's also the SAGE Safe House. So we respond to calls Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And so, as I kind of briefly mentioned earlier, we are a shelter for seniors in Edmonton that are leaving abusive situations. We do serve people outside of Edmonton as well, but we're located in Edmonton. There's also the Seniors Abuse Helpline, which is a 24-hour crisis line. So if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, you can call this number to just have someone to talk to and safety plan and kind of work through some of the fears and anxiety about leaving that situation. If there's someone who is being taken care of by professional caregivers, and they're experiencing abuse from those caregivers, then the reporting is a little bit different. So that would be through protections of persons. And there's always, you can always call. It's important when calling police to report abuse that you emphasize the vulnerability of the senior. So they're unable to get out themselves to get help because they're in a wheelchair. Right now with kids, just immune system, whatever it may be, like make that clear so that they know that that's an important situation to check out. And then my last slide is just if you want more information about elder abuse, here's a couple websites you can check out. So there's the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse and Abuse Awareness Council. So that is the end of the PowerPoint. So now, if you would like to ask any questions, feel free.
Thanks so much, Laura. So if you would like to ask a question, feel free to type in your question into the Q&A chat box, which is just located at the very bottom of your toolbar on Zoom, or you can just plug it right into the chat. If you would like to ask a question over the phone, just click that little icon that says raise hand, and I can unmute your mic.
I think you can also, if there's no questions, I could also just talk a little bit more about house. Oh, someone has a question.
Awesome. Feel free to ask your question, Mary.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for your presentation. It's very informative. Sorry, part of the audio was glitching out a little bit, and you might have answered this question. Are there any of the phone numbers that you listed? Do any of those organizations pick up elders who are in distress or abused?
In terms of picking up, do you mean like show up at the house and like take them out of there?
Right.
Somewhat. So it's a bit of a complicated answer. So the Seniors Protection Partnership would be kind of the closest to that. So if abuse was reported, and the Seniors Protection Partnership went in and was able to talk to the senior, and they found that the senior is experiencing abuse, and then now that they know of this help, they would like to leave the situation. What they would do would make sure that there's space available for them, be at the safe house or a shelter, and they can help with the transportation to those shelters. Only if there's a place to go to, and if the senior is wanting out. At the safe house, we rely on the supporting the abuse themselves. We need to talk to this, and if they sure and we fit best for them, and then we can pick them up like see. Ever, at least the protection partnership in Wisconsin and immediately remove the person, because it might make it more dangerous for them to move, and they have to have a seat as well. Did that answer your question?
I think I got most of it. It was glitching out really bad, but from what I gathered you said, I think you said that basically if there's room, is that correct?
Yeah, so if there's a space for them to go to.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not like just seniors into, so we need to make sure that there's a place for them, you know, a safe house or another shelter or another safe family member for them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and if nobody else has any questions, we'll end our session about a minute or two early. Laura, thank you so much for sharing this incredible, valuable information with all of us here today. And what I'll do too is, if you wouldn't mind just emailing me some of those direct links and numbers, what I'll do is I'll actually post them on our Seniors Forum website under Laura's session. So that way those emails and those contact information will be available right there in that event description.